Caden wiped the sweat from his brow as he stepped onto the dusty platform of the black market. The sun hung low over the alien city, casting long shadows across the crowd. Merchants shouted their prices, guards patrolled the edges, and everywhere he looked, creatures of every shape and size bargained and fought for survival. Caden's stomach twisted. He was an alpha, yes, but a struggling one. His resources were few, his pack smaller than most, and the kingdom seemed to look down on him with quiet amusement. He was not used to this world of ridicule and cruelty, but he had a purpose. He needed strength, yes, but not the kind the kingdom expected. Caden wanted loyalty, trust, and a family that could survive together, even when the odds were against them. And then he saw her, Leora. She was an Omega, small and frail, with golden eyes that held both fear and intelligence. Her cubs huddled close to her, dirty and frightened, their small bodies trembling. The auctioneer barked the rules. She was rejected by her pack, deemed weak, unwanted, and useless. The crowd laughed, some pointing fingers, others making cruel bets on how long she would last under a new master. But Caden saw something they did not. He saw a spark, a mind that could survive and a heart that could trust if given the right guidance. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and placed a bid. The crowd gasped. Other alphas laughed, thinking him foolish. "Why would you buy her?" one of them shouted. "She is weak. She and her cubs are worthless." Caden's voice was calm but strong. "They are not worthless. They just need a chance, and I will give it to them." The auctioneer hesitated, but then accepted the bid. The murmurs and laughter continued, but Caden ignored them. He knew the real challenge had only begun. The walk back to his dwelling was long. Leora and her cubs were quiet, each glance filled with wariness. Caden spoke softly. "I won't hurt you. You're safe with me. My home is not big, but it is yours now." Leora's eyes narrowed. "Everyone says that." "Everyone lies," she said, her voice shaking. Her cubs clung to her, sensing her fear. "I do not lie," Caden replied. He knelt to be at eye level with them. "I am struggling, yes, but I will protect you, and I will teach you how to survive." The dwelling was modest, a simple structure on the outskirts of the city. Caden had spent years maintaining it, hunting and farming in small ways, always careful not to attract the kingdom's scrutiny. It was not much, but it was safe. He showed Leora and the cubs their rooms, the storage for food, and the small area where they could play. The first night was tense. Leora did not sleep, watching Caden with suspicion. The cubs were too scared to move from her side. Caden sat by the fire, sharpening tools and thinking. He knew the kingdom would not understand his choice. They would call him weak, foolish, or worse. But he also knew that strength did not come from cruelty. It came from loyalty, trust, and courage. In the following days, Caden worked to provide for them. He hunted dangerous creatures in the surrounding forests, bringing back food for Leora and her cubs. He repaired the dwelling's walls, strengthened the fences, and even built a small playground area for the children. Slowly, he began to show Leora that his intentions were true. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Leora approached him. "Why are you helping us? You could have chosen anyone." "Why us?" Caden smiled faintly. "Because no one else did, and I believe that even the rejected can become strong. You, your cubs, you have the potential to survive anything." Her eyes softened slightly, though fear still lingered. "Survive anything? The kingdom will not forgive us if we fail." "We will not fail," Caden said firmly. "I will teach you. I will fight for you, and together we will show them what real strength is." The cubs began to respond slowly. They followed Caden when he went hunting, learning to track and observe, learning to avoid danger. They laughed quietly when he taught them how to set small traps for creatures that threatened their home. Leora watched, cautious but growing more trusting. She saw how Caden never used fear to control the children, how he listened to her advice, and how he made decisions for their safety rather than status. One day, a group of raiders approached the outskirts of his dwelling. Caden knew they were scouts from another pack, sent to intimidate him. Leora panicked, pulling her cubs close. "We have to leave," she whispered. Caden shook his head. "No, we stay and we defend what is ours. Trust me." He armed himself and positioned the cubs behind small barriers he had built, instructing them on safety. When the raiders arrived, Caden moved with precision, using strategy rather than brute force. The raiders were shocked. They expected a weak alpha with a weak omega and children, but Caden's careful planning and quick thinking allowed him to outmaneuver them. They retreated, murmuring in disbelief about the alpha who had survived impossible odds. Leora looked at him in awe. I didn't think anyone could do that, she said softly. Not alone. You are not alone, Caden said, smiling. And neither are your cubs. We are a pack now. The days turned into weeks. Caden trained the children in hunting, observation, and strategy. Leora began teaching them knowledge and intelligence skills, while Caden focused on courage and survival. Slowly, laughter and trust returned to their dwelling. They were still far from the kingdom's recognition, but inside their small home they felt powerful. Word of Caden's unusual family began to spread. Other alphas whispered about him in the market. Merchants talked of the alpha who dared to embrace the rejected, and the kingdom's elite began to cast skeptical glances in his direction. Some mocked him, others watched curiously, but all wondered how long his fragile little family would last. One evening, Leora approached Caden with the cubs asleep nearby. I see now, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. I see why you chose us. You didn't just buy us. You gave us a life. Caden's eyes softened. And you gave me trust. That is more valuable than any title or resource. She smiled faintly. Then what happens next? Caden looked toward the horizon, where the sun was setting in brilliant colors. Next, we survive. We grow. And one day we will show the kingdom what it means to be strong, not just in power, but in heart, courage, and loyalty. Leora nodded, finally allowing herself to believe. The cubs stirred, sensing the calm and safety in their home. They looked to Caden and then to their mother, feeling a sense of family they had never known. That night the wind carried whispers across the distant mountains. Whispers of the alpha who had bought the rejected Omega and her cubs. Whispers that would grow into a story the kingdom would never forget. Caden sat by the fire, listening to the night. He knew challenges were coming, challenges that would test every skill, every bond, every lesson they had learned. But he also knew something far more important. They would face it together. And in that, there was strength no kingdom could ever break. And so, the first chapter of Caden, Leora, and their cubs began, not with wealth, not with status, but with courage, trust, and a determination that would shock the entire kingdom in the days to come. The sun rose over the horizon, painting the skies with shades of orange and gold. Caden stood outside his dwelling, watching Leora and the cubs play near the small stream he had built for them. The laughter of the children echoed across the hills, a sound that had once been impossible for this family. Caden smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the rising sun. They had survived the first challenges, but he knew the kingdom would not leave them in peace for long. Word of his unusual family had reached the capital. The alphas and leaders of other packs whispered and speculated. Some sneered at his choices, while others were secretly curious. Caden did not seek recognition, but recognition came anyway. The kingdom had rules, and those who followed them blindly believed strength came only from wealth, power, and status. Caden was about to challenge all of that. It began when a messenger arrived, riding a fast skimmer from the city. He bowed to Caden, clearly nervous. Alpha Caden, he said, the kingdom requests your presence. A challenge has been issued. Your family, your choices, they have not gone unnoticed. You are to demonstrate the worth of your pack. Caden's eyes narrowed, but he did not hesitate. We will go, he said. But know this. We do not fight to prove ourselves to the arrogant. We fight to protect what is ours. Leora approached, concern etched on her face. Caden, are you ready for this? The kingdom will not expect what we can do. They will test us in every way. He smiled faintly. That is exactly why we will succeed. They expect weakness. They will be shocked by our strength, by our loyalty, by our courage. The journey to the capital was long and dangerous. Caden led Leora and the cubs through forests, across rivers, and over rocky terrain. Along the way, he taught the cubs not only to hunt and survive, but also to think, to strategize, and to support each other. Leora guided them in observation and knowledge, ensuring they learned quickly and effectively. When they finally reached the city, a crowd had gathered. Other alphas stood with their packs, eyes filled with doubt, suspicion, or outright contempt. The kingdom's leaders watched from their elevated platforms, expecting Caden's little family to fail. The challenge was announced, a test of skill, intelligence, and courage. Each pack was to navigate a dangerous zone filled with obstacles, wild creatures and puzzles designed to measure survival ability. The first round began, and Caden watched as the other packs struggled. Some were overconfident, charging recklessly. Others panicked, unable to cooperate. When it was their turn, whispers ran through the crowd. The rejected Omega and her cubs. Will they survive? Caden took Leora's hand. Trust yourself, trust the cubs, and trust me. Together we are unstoppable. Leora nodded, and the family entered the challenge zone. The obstacles were difficult. Treacherous cliffs, sudden drops, and unpredictable creatures. The cubs clung close to Caden, following his every instruction. He guided them, teaching quick thinking and careful movement. Leora used her knowledge to solve puzzles and avoid traps. The crowd gasped as the small family moved with precision and unity. Where other packs struggled or fell into danger, Caden's family advanced with calm determination. They rescued a trapped cub from a sudden pitfall, used clever tricks to bypass a deadly predator, and even worked together to solve a complex puzzle that required both strength and intellect. By the end of the challenge, they emerged unscathed, their faces glowing with triumph. The kingdom was stunned. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to astonishment. No one had expected a struggling alpha with a rejected Omega and her cubs to succeed, much less excel. The leaders of the kingdom approached, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and respect. Alpha Caden, one of them said, How did you achieve this? Caden bowed slightly, but his eyes were steady. We survived together. We trusted each other. We did not rely on status, wealth, or fear. Strength comes from loyalty, courage, and heart. My family and I are strong because we are united. Leora stepped forward, her voice steady and proud. The kingdom may have rejected us once. They may have doubted us, but we have proven that even the rejected can achieve greatness if given trust and opportunity. The cubs, once frightened and timid, now stood proudly beside Caden and Leora. They had learned lessons of courage, intelligence, and cooperation that no amount of privilege could teach. The crowd stared, unable to deny the truth before them. The kingdom leaders held a council to discuss the outcome. It was clear that Caden and his family had not only survived but excelled. They had outperformed every other pack, showing qualities that the rigid hierarchy of the kingdom had ignored. Rumors spread quickly. Other alphas began to approach Caden, asking for advice, seeking training, or even offering alliances. The whispers that once mocked him turned to respect. People began to realize that true strength was not measured by birthright or wealth, but by courage, intelligence, loyalty, and the ability to protect those who cannot protect themselves. One evening, after the challenge was complete, Caden stood on a high balcony with Leora and the cubs. The city sprawled beneath them, a sea of lights and movement. Leora rested her head on his shoulder. You were right, she said softly. They never expected us to succeed. They never expected us to be strong. Caden looked down at his family, pride swelling in his chest. They are beginning to understand. But what matters most is that we know our own strength, that we know what we are capable of. No kingdom, no challenge, no critic can take that away from us. The cubs giggled as they played nearby, their small hands reaching for the stars that shone in the night sky. They had grown in ways that few could imagine. They had learned courage, patience, and trust. They had learned that family is not only about blood, but about loyalty and love. Word reached the far corners of the kingdom. Stories were told of the Alpha who had bought the rejected Omega and her cubs, and how they had faced impossible odds to achieve greatness. Scholars wrote about Caden's strategies. Leaders reconsidered their hierarchies. And common citizens, inspired by the tale, began to believe in possibilities beyond rigid rules. Caden's dwelling, once a modest home on the edge of the world, became a symbol. It stood for courage, for loyalty, and for the power of believing in those whom others reject. And though Caden did not seek fame, his actions had already changed the kingdom. One quiet night, Caden, Leora, and the cubs sat together by the fire. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of peace and triumph. Caden looked at Leora and said, "We have done more than survive. We have shown what it means to be strong, and we will continue to grow together." Leora smiled, her eyes shining. The kingdom may never forget us, and perhaps they will finally understand that strength is not just in power but in heart. The cubs leaned against them, tired but happy. They had faced fear, danger, and doubt, and they had triumphed. They had found a home, a family, and a future that no one could take away. And so the kingdom was left in awe. The Alpha who had chosen the rejected had not only survived, but changed the hearts and minds of everyone who had doubted him. Caden's story became a legend, a tale of courage, loyalty, and hope. The once struggling Alpha, the rejected Omega, and her brave cubs stood together, unbroken, unstoppable, and united. They had proven that true strength comes not from status or fear, but from love, courage, and the willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And in that, the kingdom learned a lesson it would never forget.